Why would she make any mention of assassination in the midst of a campaign?
Well, what she was talking about was the timeline. Everyone has told her to get out of the race. She has said, I'm not getting out of the race, nor should I get out of the race. And she was referring to the timeline, how these events have gone into June. It's happened in the past. I mean, she had made a very similar statement, as you know, in Time magazine in March. Nobody said anything about it. It's unfortunate. The people in the editorial board didn't misinterpret it at all. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. issued a statement. He didn't misinterpret it at all. But it's unfortunate. A hyped-up press over Memorial Day weekend, the Obama campaign inflaming it, tried to take these words out of context. She was making a point merely about the timeline.
Well, when you say the Obama campaign inflamed it, their comment was it's unfortunate. Senator Obama yesterday on the plane said, I'm going to take her at her word. How are they inflaming it?
Yeah, that's great. But Friday, they were all part of this process. The press secretary came out and attacked Senator Clinton and got it going so that the story would be around for 3 days. It's nice to get a story going and then, let it go for 3 days over the weekend and say, oh, she didn't mean anything about it. I mean, we got to remember, we have to, Chris, pull this party together. Both of these candidates have received over 17 million votes. Actually, more people have voted for Hillary than any candidate running for the nomination on either political party. We need to remember that. When this process is over, and I think it'll be over shortly, we all have to come together, and people just need to settle down. Let's let the primaries continue over the course of next week.
Does Senator Clinton understand how tasteless, even how ghoulish it is to even use the word assassination, especially when there have been concerns about Senator Obama's safety?
Well, first of all, this was all about Hillary Clinton and the reasons why she was in this race and the timeline.
She could have just said 1968 and Bobby Kennedy. She didn't have to say assassination.
Yeah, and as she said, if anyone took offense to what I had said, then I apologize for it. Sure, I agree.
Does she understand how tasteless and ghoulish it is to use that word?
She was merely talking about the timeline. She understands if it offended people. She apologized for that. Well, let's remember, let's keep this in context. We've been in this race now for 17 months. We've been out there. What the voters want us to focus on is health care, education, oil prices. Those are the issues that people are focused on, Chris, and that's what this campaign ought to be about. We need to be very careful at the end of this process now that we have got to bring us together. We have a very important election on November 4th.
Let's examine. You talk about her apology. Let's examine her effort at damage control later that same day, Friday.
Sure.
Here it was.
The Kennedys have been much on my mind the last days because of Senator Kennedy, and I, regret that if my referencing that moment of trauma for our entire nation, and particularly for the Kennedy family, was in any way offensive. I certainly had no intention of that whatsoever.
First of all, forgive me, that's one of those classic Washington non-apology apologies. I regret if my referencing was offensive. Question, does she think it was offensive, and was she flat out apologizing?
At the time she said it, she was merely talking about a timeline of how these events go into June. And she said, if anyone found offense to it, I apologize. She had said that on Friday when it first came out. But it's interesting, as I say, that
she didn't say I apologize. She said, I regret if anyone found it offensive.
Regret, apologize. You and I could sit here and parse words all morning. The bottom line is she was talking about a timeline. This event is going into June, obviously. We have some very important contests in June. And that's what she was referring to.
If she was apologizing, who was she apologizing to?
Probably members of the Kennedy family, anyone who would have taken offense. But immediately, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Senator Kennedy's son, went out and said, I did not misinterpret it, I did not misjudge it, and no one else should. So if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doesn't find offense to it, why is it that everybody else should? They shouldn't. We ought to take Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He did not misinterpret it or misjudge it.
Does she apologize to the Obamas?
Let's be clear, this had nothing to do with Senator Obama or his campaign. It was about Hillary Clinton staying in the race. And the reason she's staying in the race, Chris, let's be very clear. She has now received more votes than Senator Obama of all the people who have gone and voted. We've just come off a big win in Kentucky, 35 points, 41 points in West Virginia. She is winning races. That's why she's staying in this. And she's fighting for all those people who have supported her, for all the women who want to see the first woman president of the United States of America, all the people who've come up to Hillary Clinton, who've talked about how their lives have been affected, want her in that office to change their lives for the better.
I want to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to get off this.
Okay.
When Governor Huckabee made a bad joke at the NRA about someone pointing a gun at Obama, he immediately apologized and he personally called Obama to say he was sorry. Has Senator Clinton personally called Obama?
No, and nor should she. Let's be very clear. I will say this again. This has nothing to do with Senator Obama. This was all about Hillary Clinton, her campaign, Chris, and her timeline.
Given the fact that people have been so offended, wouldn't it make sense for her simply to call and say, hey, listen, if this caused you any heartburn, I'm sorry?
First of all, I don't know. You're saying everyone's offended. You know, the press corps, it's a quiet weekend. Everybody got overhyped, had a big weekend talking about it. But you know what I got to tell you? Chris, out in Puerto Rico and South Dakota, where I just was last week in Montana, this is not what they're talking about. They're talking about $4 a gallon gas. They're not going away for Memorial Day weekend. They're talking about having...
I mean, I'll tell you somebody who was offended. Charlie Rangel, one of your big supporters, one of the people who helped get Hillary Clinton into politics, running for the Senate from New York, said it was one of the dumbest remarks he'd ever heard. So there are a lot of people who were offended. I want to ask you one last question.
Congressman Rangel's entitled to his opinion. I can tell you for the vast majority of people who are voting in these upcoming contests and why we're in this to win the nomination, they want us focused on the issues that are affecting their daily lives.
Last question. Senator Clinton explained her reference to the Kennedy assassination by saying that the family is on her mind because of Ted Kennedy's recent illness. But as you point out, more than 2 months ago, here's what she told Time magazine. Primary contests used to last a lot longer. We all remember the great tragedy of Bobby Kennedy being assassinated in June in L.A. So it's not true that she started thinking about this and it was on her mind because of Ted Kennedy's illness.
Maybe, obviously, in this context, she has had thousands of interviews since she marched to Time magazine, thousands and thousands. Maybe on this one editorial board, she was back because she was thinking about Senator Kennedy and the brain cancer and all of that issue.
Okay.